and that it's working, and I don't wanna.
Jay's gonna be here, isn't he?
Yes, I think he is.
Morning, Lyle.
Morning.
Morning, Rob.
Dave. Morning, Dave. Morning, Dave.
Hey, Rob.
Hello, morning, everyone.
Rob.
Morning, Justin. Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, Justin.
Dave, before we
Good
get
morning,
going,
sir. Just audio this morning, and I'll try not to run into anybody while we're on the call.
Okay.
I talked with
Oh,
Katie
you got it.
yesterday
Yeah.
at Tug Hill, and they've never been able to get Zukowski.
I know, I was gonna, yeah.
And she was working with the head of the Assessors Association, and she came up with, she was working with Warren Wheeler, and they have an attorney that served on their valuation team as they created the new valuation model that's willing to do the same thing.
Okay.
Could you, and she's interested if we're still willing to be a
Yeah.
part of that.
Yep.
Could you give her a
Yep.
call? And
Okay.
I don't know the attorney. Good.
Dave Converson, text, he's not gonna be able to join us. I don't,
Okay.
if you saw that, yeah.
Recording in progress.
Is this everybody then?
Yep.
We need to get going because John's got a tight schedule.
Yeah, we got a meeting coming in at 9:30 behind us here too, so.
So I'll call the meeting to order and we'll do the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I guess the first order of business is to review pending solar projects.
That's a spreadsheet.
Yeah, do you want me to bring it up?
Sure.
I can't, I have to stop the recording.
You only had to.
No, or can you just share the screen and not minimize it or not?
I'm not really sure.
Can we just
I must.
print them and move on, come back to it?
Yeah, can we go to the next one and I'll.
Sure.
Square away.
It is the review of the pilot application.
So we,
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Where did it, you do that?
so we sent you a new page, part of the packet, to show the breakout renewable energy costs. And you saw Lyle had in there a note too that we add in there the acreage for the project too, which we did not include.
Where did you want that in there?
Well,
Didn't you put it in?
No.
no,
Oh, it doesn't. Oh, I thought I saw it. I went through it yesterday and I thought it was there.
I don't think we did.
Maybe.
but they may have mentioned it in their description. We don't have a question asking for this of the acreage of it.
Did we get a page, you said, Dave?
Yep, was that part of the packet? No?
The application was the only.
Just the total application?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got that, yeah.
What, page 13?
I sent some comments out about the application, and the state has put out a second model for the valuation. It's not the final model, but I'm not sure we should finalize our application until we know the information that's needed to plug into whatever the state's model is, so that at the time of application, we can require the developer to submit that application. I'm going to be honest, the second model was a lot more complicated than the first. So I just wonder if we should wait till the final model comes out and make sure that whatever is needed for us or the assessors that we gather that information at application time.
Yeah, when is Justin, when is all that supposed to be final?
October 1st is the last day for comments, and then I think it's within a month after that
That's soon.
that they're gonna, I think it'll be fairly quick because we're coming up on taxable status date in March, so.
Well, I mean, the question is, I mean, if we want to at least use this page for now, I mean, we just got one solar product, if any come in the meantime, that we can require that.
Okay. I think that's acceptable, as long as it's not a big deal to add additional requirements
We can
to
change
our
it, we can
application.
change it anytime we want, the
Okay.
application, yeah. It's not like changing the policy, so.
Yeah, the assessment model is going to be useful for the IDA as part of the application process to help establish a more accurate cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
So I tend to agree that the final version will be useful and can be incorporated as an exercise for the applicants to fill out when they submit. I'm guessing mid-November might be the time you see the model. The predominant tax status date that you're going to see is March 1 in the towns. You have a December 1 in the city. You probably won't see much solar there, but it may be helpful, towards the end of the year to add the model to the application, or as maybe just an addendum that's solar specific or renewable energy specific.
Justin also made a couple comments that he thought we should add to the application. What was it? Host community benefit value. Weren't there a couple of things, Justin, you suggested be added to the application?
Yeah, the applicants tend to be kind of sparse in information, and it leaves staff in the first instance, and then council as we catch these applications. We tend to scramble and fill in the gaps. They might provide an address. They might provide a tax ID number. It's helpful to get a full description of the subject parcel. Sometimes it'll be 100 acres somewhere out in whatever town. They're leasing maybe 30 of it. If we get the existing tax bills, the name of the owner and the status of their ground lease as part of the application, that'll help us and put us in a better starting point, so we're not scrambling to find those things. And together with the final model, what we can do, we'll be a little bit more equipped as the application is being processed to reach out to the assessor and say, hey, this is existing ag land. The lease hasn't been deployed yet, so it's still exempt as ag or partially exempt as ag. Hey, assessor, what do you think is going to happen to this 30 acres that are being converted to commercial and then hosting a renewable energy project? And by the by, based on this model, do you agree with the model, or where are we going to land for a projected assessed value on the land as converted and the array? And then we can lay our pilot model across that and have a really good piece of bits of information to assume when we have our public hearing, as opposed to doing a lot of guesswork. So that I think those kind of enhancements will make your cost benefit analysis much more dialed in, and allow staff to kind of package these things without grasping at straws or kind of making a lot of assumptions.
All right, we'll add those.
Wouldn't we just deem that application as incomplete at that time if we don't have all the information?
We don't deem it complete until we have it, but like Justin said, like we're adding some of this stuff. If we add it on here now and ask for it, very specific.
Even some of the stuff that Justin was talking about was previous to this. I mean, just general information, we don't seem to be getting on the application.
Well, I think
We've had, like Justin said, we've had a couple of applications where, the page where asked for construction costs, they just show a total. We come back, we need more detail. So
but the issue of the acreage is there's the acreage that's under lease.
Right.
You might have a 100-acre parcel, like he said, in the acreage. We need to know the acreage under lease, or the assessors are going to know that. And I think it'd be nice to know the fenced-in acreage too. The actual.
Yeah, because they have to pay tax on it. on the total
You
fenced
can
in area.
basically say, if you have a survey, we want the survey, and we're not gonna accept the application until we have it. If the information's available, require it. And if they don't have a survey yet, it's probably too premature to even have the application come in. So it's packaging, and by the by, I don't know if you guys got the nice letter from the Department of Labor this week. Even though the state committee on prevailing wage was never appointed, Department of Labor is saying as of January 1, we're there. And closing a straight lease in December is not a preemptive way to avoid prevailing wage. For in this case, we're talking about solar, anything over. But if there's an assumption that, there's the problem. We have to assume if there's a calculation of more than 30% benefits to total project cost, they have to use prevailing wage. So what we're doing internally is deploying, hopefully, a memo to all our clients in the next week about how this is going to work. The state has not told us how to calculate 30%, whether pilot benefits are in or out. There's a big trap door where you can exclude benefits that cannot be reasonably estimated at this time. And you can look at a pilot out in 20 years and you don't know what it's going to say. So we're trying to figure out how the 30% is going to be calculated. And there's also the denominator of total project costs, where, Dave can attest and Lyle can attest, you'll get applicants that just put, we've had one in particular here that we fought with, they just put in total project cost of, 3 million or 4 million. They won't articulate land costs, they won't articulate equipment costs, they won't articulate soft costs, they won't articulate interconnect costs. And they just assume that they can submit the application and we'll process it. They should be robustly filling those out for a number of reasons. Number one, so we can accurately estimate sales tax. There's a different analysis with equipment as opposed to general construction labor. And by the way, interconnect counts, soft costs count. They typically will go light with these things in the context of trying to abbreviate the administrative fee to be charged. But the concept of prevailing wage kicking in runs against that. We want every bit of soft costs. We want construction interest included, because if they raise the total project cost within reason, including soft costs, land costs, interconnect costs, construction interest, add them in, that will temper where 30% lands on the benefits to avoid prevailing wage, or at least we have a reasonable assumption at the beginning that, okay, guys, your labor costs aren't being spiked because you have a project cost that includes everything it should include, and we reasonably expect the pilot to only, exempt a certain amount of stuff. The sales tax, and if they use mortgage tax, those are easy to assume, and they're front end. It's the pilot that gets a little weird, and the state hasn't, now with solar, the state is kind of prescribing a way to make an assumption on assessed value. You still can play around with a hotel or a warehouse and you can make low assumptions on as-built. But mill rates are the last place to play around. You can assume that mill rates are going to be flat for 15 years, which is probably not reasonable. Or you can just perhaps use a 2% escalator over the 15 years, and maybe that's going to fly. But there's going to be a lot of these metrics in flux in the next 3-4 months. And it's important for applications to be, in this particular case, for solar, robust. Anything over 5 megawatts, you're going to want to see every dime that they put in on the front end. And that could be host community agreement payments too, to spike that up if they do front end. And that kind of pokes the bear on the next part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? With solar, is it 5 megawatts? If a 5 megawatt facility is over $5 million, does that kick it in?
I believe so. And anything over 5 megawatts, you're going to see a project cost over 5 million. They'll generally on a CapEx basis about $1 million a megawatt.
But this project,
the
project we're looking at today is 4.09 or 4.03 megawatts with a total cost estimate over $5 million. Will the fact that it's under 5 megawatts and over $5 million kick it in?
I think the exclusion, I'd have to double check, I'm driving, but the exclusion for solar is projects under 5 megawatts
Okay.
not being picked up, so they may be in a safe harbor. You still want the costs articulated though. Even if it goes over 5 million, you're generally okay if you're under 5 megawatts.
Okay.
And again, the new assessment model is going to be helpful for you. It's going to temper some assumptions and probably be a bit of a guidepost for assessors to kind of project where things are going to land once they're completed in construction. Right now, a typical applicant coming through you isn't going to be placed in service until next fall, probably at this point.
So does the IDA have any liability exposure if a project should have complied with prevailing wages but doesn't, or is that all on the contractor or the project?
It's the developer largely that has the largest piece of risk, but their risk is generally borne through your application, the public benefits. So you're going to get caught up in it, and it'll be a horrible nuisance if you have a project that tries to skew things or doesn't necessarily follow a reasonable standard.
Okay.
So by extension, it's kind of on you to come up with a good onboarding process that puts together reasonable assumptions. And that right now you're doing exactly that. You're looking at your application, which is the onboarding tool. So.
Okay.
So I wonder who's the policing agency of that then, Justin, of the 30%? Would it be whoever's the public entity that's funding it, like ESD or something like that? I mean, who follows up to make sure that it's less than 30% or when it goes over 30%? Who's monitoring that?
The Department of Labor is the governing agency, the regulatory body, and quite literally, you may have an applicant close with you and either be covered or not. The problem with everyone's kind of thought like, oh geez, let's close our street leases by December 31st and then we're all excluded, we're safe harbor. But no, if they sign a construction contract after January 1 or pull a building permit after January 1, it pulls them in. So just closing with us doesn't necessarily create a safe harbor. What can happen after the fact is if anyone, including a member of the labor community, calls the Department of Labor and says they're building a solar farm and they're using non-union guys, you're going to have a Department of Labor person show up on that site. They may call you, and to the extent that they have documentation that they think is reasonable that shows they have benefits over 30%, they're going to get a wage assessment and shut them down. So that's the risk, and then all of a sudden, they got to change everything, and maybe 30% more costs are added onto their project.
So that's not just for alternative energy. So Conval, the egg factory, if that comes later,
That's going to be prevailing wage rate. Yeah.
I think it's any project.
Yeah. You're looking at Roth current expansion. They're good. They're going to be done. I think they're pulling a CO next month. We'll close on that. The CWT, the chicken farm, they're going to be stuck with it. I assume that's over $5 million. Anything you have coming down the pike over $5 million.
So if they actually start before December 31st, then are they excluded from the prevailing wage rate? Or does it?
What they have to do is they have to close with you.
Right.
They have to sign all of their construction contracts and have all their building permits pulled before January 1.
Got it. Okay.
And to the extent that they don't have any construction contracts or any permits to pull inside 2022, they can proceed somewhat safely. But the minute they do something after January 1 that brings them into the regime, like literally they could have a general construction contract signed, and if they're going to sign any direct subs in mid-January, that could screw them.
Right.
So
That's where.
But if they actually start construction, say they start construction December 1, but then they do some additional contracts in January. Are the January contracts? Those are subject to prevailing wage because they took place after January 1st. the ones prior to, if they started some aspect of the work before, are not subject?
That's a good question. We could ask for guidance from labor, but I can guess the reaction is that anything that's triggered after January 1 could bring the whole project in.
So I have to ask this, do I need to make a phone call to CWT and inform them of this? And I'll tell you right now, it's probably a project killer.
Or we have to go back to our numbers. I mean,
Is
listen,
Lundy
Don,
able to fly? I would call Lundy and say, how fast can you go here, guy? Let's get it's his client. And quite frankly, I don't know if he's doing a design build and he's going to lease to them, or if he's just going to give them a deed and then build it under a construction contract, or what the deal is.
I've been trying to confirm it, but right now the information I have, Justin, is that he is selling the property and then they will have him build the facility.
But is he falling to the 30%, Jay? Or,
I don't,
because that's the kicker, if it's 30%. If he's,
We can run a model. We can run a model right now based on what we know about the application.
probably should.
We could do a sales tax takeoff. We could do a mortgage tax takeoff.
Yeah, we can do
We
that.
can model the pilot. If it's a standard pilot, the modeling needs to be, somewhat strategic. But if you look at an assumption on as-built, go talk to the assessor, say, hey, they're building it and the projected project costs are this. Based on your mill rates and what you think the building will be assessed at post-construction, we can model our pilot with a 2% assumption on mill rates and come up with a gross number. If it lands at 26%, fine. Tell Mike he's cool. There's no stress here. But if the modeling shows, and this includes any other ESDC benefits, I don't know if there's any grants or CFA stuff, that counts too. But if it's just IDA benefits and we can model them in a way that's reasonable to show that they're not at risk, that may take the pressure off timing.
Well,
If the modeling shows 33%, we may say, hey guys, can we close in December? Can Mike sign his major construction contract and have all subs nailed down in December? And will the town give him his building permit this December? You might be able to eliminate the risk.
I think Mike's ready to begin construction October 1st. The delay right now is just them putting an application into ESD at this point. So we need to talk to him on that.
That begs the question: how much is that relief that ESDC is going to provide, and what form is it? Are they looking for a capital grant? Or are they looking for tax credits that might need to be taken into account?
I think they're looking for the grant, but and the amount is, I can guess what the amount they're asking is, but probably shouldn't say till they've submitted that's the application they need to submit yet. You can probably guess too.
Well, I think we're off the alternative energy. We need to get a handle on how to work these through, because we have Conval, DigiCollect, we have CWT, we have most of these large solar projects. If they've received rec credits, they've had to agree to pay prevailing wage rates, so it's kind of moot for them, regardless. But
Well, Conval and DigiCollect, they're not going to be getting. There's no heads up is going to help because they're not going to be getting construction before next year. So.
yeah, but in their modeling, do they understand?
Yeah, they'll make sure they do.
I thought I heard Harry say on one of those meetings that he planned on using.
He's planning to use
all
labor,
union labor,
yeah, because he's in meeting with labor. So I don't think that'll be an issue for them.
Good.
All right.
interesting.
I mean, there's also the woman-owned, minority-owned businesses that are tagged down to some of these benefits too, that you gotta have so much of that in the mix on top of the
Yep.
prevailing wage.
If they have state assistance, right?
We good on the application?
Yep.
For now?
We'll draft it up and circulate it for comment
Does that cover what?
based on what we were just talking about.
This is land and or building acquisition, but you want leased.
I want the lease.
And then you would put it under,
Yep, I've got that down.
you got that? Okay.
Are we ready to
We
go
are.
active?
Yep.
All right.
Do we have this updated?
Yes,
spreadsheet?
we've added the latest one that came in there, Lifestyle Renewables.
Yeah. I hope you're not expecting us old guys to read.
I know, it's one of those things that's hard. I know.
I can see colors.
I thought you said you were colorblind.
Well, I am.
He can tell you what they are. He doesn't.
I know there's a red one there and a white one, and it looks like yellow, green. Am I getting it?
Just a second, I'll issue you your driver's license.
So I guess, does anybody have any information on any of these?
Do you have Borrego on there?
Yep, we have these ones right here.
You know, it'd be nice, like, I sent Jay a couple documents off of the state site, and they refer to, do you have like Tracy Solar for the Orleans one as the name of the project on there?
For the,
You just had it.
over here, for this.
That's
right here.
Orleans, EDF.
EDF is Tracy Solar.
Isn't that what the?
Oh, is that on there twice? Because see down the bottom, it's there again on Tracy Road. You look over the third
Yeah,
tower.
right here.
That's the same project, isn't it?
Yeah,
Twice.
okay.
We need to renew.
I just think it makes sense, like Boralex is Greens Corners, so if people are looking at the state site, they will reference it by Greens Corners Solar before you'll find it as EDF Renewables. So,
Are all counties seeing this much activity on solar, Dave, you know? Or is it, you know, we got an awful lot of it here. it seems
We
like.
do, I think some counties are seeing more than others.
What's the reason for that?
Agricultural
land.
land.
Available land.
We have a lot of agricultural land and it's relatively cheap compared to other parts of the state.
Also, if you heard Justin talk about a 2.0 mill rate, $2 mill rate or whatever, you know, that references $20 a thousand. So if you go out in Western New York, that might be $35 a thousand or 40, you know, the underlying tax rates in this section of the state are a little bit lower than some other areas too. So,
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you'll hit 40 out in Western New York. But you know, you guys are, you know, somewhat fortunate up in the North Country to be, you know, somewhere between 18 and, you know, 28 type of thing. But then you got to consider special district taxes are outside the general mill rate, and they're fully taxable. So if a project gets assessed at $5 million, they're paying special districts at full freight outside the pilot, which some people tend to forget. But the 2% we're talking about is if you have a $20 mill rate, your assumption on going in on what total full taxation would be in year one would be $20, you know, times the assessed value. And then we try to assume, you know, through the life of a pilot, what that annual total taxation would be. And you don't know what the school and the town and the county are going to do in a particular year. So you just assume that $20 is going to be, you know, $20 escalating at 2% the next year and then compounding at 2% throughout the life. And then you kind of compare what your fixed dollar pilot would be against those assessed values in each year. And you can, at the bottom of that, you kind of gross up what the benefits are going to be for the life of the pilot. And that counts in the 30% as far as labor is concerned. The problem being there is an exception in the new prevailing wage statute at 224 that excludes public subsidies and benefits that cannot be reasonably estimated at the time of construction. What we just said about estimating benefits is, you know, it's, you know, you can throw some grass in the wind and guess where it's going to land. But we're looking at whether we can exclude or substantially exclude some pilot benefits because they're really speculative. And carving out the pilot out of the public subsidies would really knock the stuffing out of the 30% problem. So that we're kind of weighing that, and if we can get a Department of Labor ruling or guidance letter, or if it'd be nice if the governor appointed that committee. It's their job to provide the not just the economic development community, but the entire construction industry with what this means. They're charged with giving us definitions and formulas. The unfortunate thing is we're looking at the problem occurring in less than 90 days, and we don't have any guidance. So we're trying to come up with a way to be reasonable, but there's some real dollars involved if labor were to determine that our reasonable approach isn't. So we're trying to be super careful about it.
Yeah, special district taxes are added into the new model too. So when you add the effective tax rate into the discount to create your discount rate, you add in the special district rates too. So that'll be factored into what value the new models pump out.
Oh, they get a below the line deduction there. That's nice. That'll help.
Yeah, and it also includes the land value, correct? But once it pumps out a value, you have to go work backdoor into what portion of, let's say, that $5 million estimate of value is attributed to the land. So
Yeah,
with
that's
this
right.
thought that there's going to be this massive increase in taxable value in the land, I think is out the window somewhat. So, but the values I saw in Model 1 really didn't scare me a whole lot. So
It was drafted by the development community, so they got a pretty good work product.
what is a strike price in, I don't know, in the valuation model 2, one of the inputs is called a strike price. Do you know what that is, Justin?
And I'm guessing energy pricing,
Okay.
for whether they have a PPA or an estimate on what their sales rate on kilowatt hours. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they had a lot of new things in there that they didn't have definitions in their guidance on, so I really couldn't play much with it. So
Oh, this is Rob, and I don't know this off the top of my head, I Googled it. A strike price in finance is an option. The price can be bought of an underlying security or commodity or derivative, so it's their energy trading. So it has to do with, they might have a fixed PPA or they might be selling these at market rates or something. So it must have something to do with how they price their derivatives versus their energy.
That sounds right.
So
And Google told me this, so I don't know this.
Yeah, I just Googled it too.
So Marshall, that 1, 2, 3.
So
I still
these
can't
two
figure
here,
out what's in-
Take that one out, but it's not complete. And I think, look across to see, but those are
yeah, it's the only difference is that this one says it's in Article 10 and this one says it's in ORES.
because they switched to ORES probably, and we didn't.
On the, I know Paul and Justin communicated on this, and I picked up a couple things in some of the emails, and while you're on this subject, it appears 94C has a variety of inputs that you're all talking about. And I think Justin alluded to this, should we not create either an appendix or something to actually have them specifically fill in those inputs, so it's not left to question? I mean, sort of like what Justin's saying about, they put construction costs 30 million, no, we need it broken down. So should we almost precisely give them a document that they have to fill out, and there'll be no blanks, otherwise we're not going to accept the application? And maybe that's too draconian, but that's, I think, what we're heading towards.
I think as we were just talking about, Rob, is adding some of those lines into the application for the costs and such, so.
I think
So
Justin,
rather than burying it in the application, I'm just saying, should we not just create an appendix?
well, Justin suggests,
Foresee inputs, project construction costs, almost create the balance sheet or the cost tally sheet precisely the way you want it. Because right now, our form is used for all projects, and maybe solar and wind or any renewable project shouldn't use the form that's in our application. It should say refer to appendix A as an example.
Well, that's what we,
I
so
think there's a
Rob,
lot
so-
of different inputs that don't involve, say, the chicken hatchery, that involve solar project.
I think we're talking the same thing. So what we've done here is drafted a page for renewable energy projects that's in the application. So
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't, if you've done that, I haven't seen.
Yeah, so,
Do
So-
we need to call out though, wind? I mean, we really don't call out wind on some of this stuff. It's really geared towards solar.
So like on the renewable projects, I know we're
we just use the term
pressing
renewable,
some
so.
buttons about getting, more defined
Oh, I see.
construction, interconnection, and actually outside grant costs, to understand the level of.
We can add a line there. Yeah.
Subsidies that we should further contribute. And then we also have talked a lot about, is it on agricultural land, the soil types, things of that nature. And I think we've also talked about decommissioning, fighting
Yeah,
time.
we just Add a line like that.
So as an example, and I know this is more of a community issue, a local issue, but if a project goes under 94C, I don't think the locality gets a hell of a lot of say on too much of the permitting. And that would obviously be for deviation for larger projects. But if a solar project were to sink some metal posts or concrete posts, they didn't bother decommissioning, they just cut them off, you can't use it as ag land in the gas. I don't think your plows would work too well going through going through non-soil types. As an example, and it may only apply to larger projects, but those might be some other things we should consider if we are to get into a deviation where we have to actually obtain this information. The decommissioning plan might be quite important on larger projects. I'm not saying it's unimportant on smaller projects, but I'm pretty sure that still stays on the ball.
Well, they have to have a decommissioning plan under 94C. Everything that falls under 94C is going to fall under a deviation based upon our UTEP, correct?
Right.
So at some point in time, I think our role should be to the taxing jurisdictions. We're negotiating a pilot. If they're unhappy with the decommissioning plan, all they got to say is, we're not doing it.
Right.
And so I think
Well,
the
it's all
taxing
part of the site plan.
jurisdictions and part of the pilot is going to have the big hammer as to the terms of a decommissioning plan. The question is, can they sign a decommissioning plan that goes further than what the state has approved? That I don't know the answer. Because I think 94C has language where, I know Article 10 did, where a town can't pass regulations stricter than what the state has adopted, and I could be wrong. I don't.
But I wouldn't think a decommissioning agreement in terms of that would be considered regulation.
Well, in these things, they reference sections of law as to what's required, so. But I think the municipalities are gonna have the ultimate hammer when it comes to whether or not the decommissioning plan is.
In fact, it should be part of the site plan review.
That's kind of.
There's no site plan review on
This
94.
application- If this application were used for, say, a deviation project, will the town have any input on the decommissioning plan, or will it even accept it? So like even a simple affirmation, have you seen it, do you agree with it, are the impacts entirely covered? At least getting the input on that side from the local community, which kind of goes to that, as Justin calls it, the third rail thing, the host community agreement concept of, if you can't mitigate the impacts, you're gonna pay for them. And I still agree there's some zoning, there's pilots, but that's my opinion. But I think they kind of go hand in hand, and it gets into a robust discussion. I don't want to hear that, we put up a large solar project on good fine farmland, and 20 years from now, we're just gonna put a pulse into farmland. Well, if you don't decommission it properly, it's not farmland anymore.
And I have some very serious concerns about decommissioning plans based on what I've been reading and researching that I'd like to share with the group at some point on the agenda, Rob.
Yeah, so I just want to get my 2 cents in, and then I can go back to work and listen. You came to a point where I had some contribution.
Right, so we got comments, we'll revise the solar thing for the application. We'll add in the
I
line.
mean, if this is renewable energy, do we ever want to consider hydro? I don't know if that'll ever come around. Hydro is pretty tough to put something in water anymore, but this is a general application, right? So
Yeah,
consider hydroelectric or hydro, solar and wind.
Should be able to allow it. I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, if we run into an issue, we just ask for what else we need on the information for that.
And then like battery storage costs, it should be, and maybe you should put it, if applicable, because
Yeah.
that's not gonna be on the wind deal
Right,
probably.
yeah.
You know, I was concerned when I sat in on the webinar, they said that nobody's installed a battery storage. It's not, neither the state models takes in battery storage because they said no one's put it in yet. I think it's already in up here, isn't it?
It is here.
Four of ULIA projects will have battery storage by the end of this year. They've already notified us.
Yeah, so that'll kick in the next level.
And I've modified the pilot payment accordingly.
So I don't know what they're going to do as it relates to that evaluation, whether battery storage is going to be a separate thing or if they're gonna have to, they'll be updating this model annually would be my guess, as developers claim it's not working right. So,
Hey,
and
hey,
the,
Lyle, is that an existing pilot?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, it is. They've already
They
made
added
it.
a battery improvement after closing?
Yes.
But Justin, when we did the pilot, we put a provision in there that if they did add battery storage, there's a schedule in there for the additional payments. Because
Okay.
at the time, they weren't sure if they're gonna do it.
Fixed or on a formula?
So we built it in,
fixed.
yeah.
Okay.
Not sure that's right, but we had to deal with it at that time because it came up, so. But when those get valued,
Contingent assistance, and then they hit it, okay.
but they'll have to be valued using the new model, even though we have that pilot in place for things like special districts and stuff, so.
Yeah, they should be getting, outside of the pilot, they'll be getting a special district tax bill, presumably out of the county or probably the town, I guess.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to, the Orleans projects that have been built up there have pretty high special district. They have that highway special item. We'll see how that plays into what we projected to them it would be and what it ends up being under the new model.
Yeah.
So, but
We good on the update of?
Yep.
you're gonna email us the spreadsheet?
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll make those changes on the.
Where are we at? Decommissioning agreement?
Yep.
For projects on Egg Lane.
You want me to?
Sure.
Go ahead.
You want to-
Okay, well, just so everybody is aware, at the last Jefferson County Ag and Farmland Protection Board meeting, Doug Shelmadine gave me a 1 page of a decommissioning plan for a project in southern Jefferson County and asked me to review it quickly at the meeting. And as I read through it, I was very concerned about what I read. For example, it calls for replacing topsoil on disturbed areas to a depth of 4 inches. That's horrendously inadequate. That's not what's in Ag and Markets guidelines. It's just not a good practice. So from there, the Ag and Farmland Protection Board is going to start looking at this issue. I brought it up at the board meeting and the board expressed concerns. And so I started taking a look at some of the plans. Paul gave me a couple to look at. And I do have some very serious concerns. One thing I'd like to say to start with, based on our conversation we just had, New York State Department of Ag and Markets puts out guidelines for solar energy projects, construction mitigation, and decommissioning plans. Those are guidelines. I don't know, and maybe Justin, you do, I don't know that there's any legal authority behind them to say that you can't be stricter than these guidelines. I'm not aware of that. So these are guidelines. So as I read through the 2 plans that Paul gave me, they're not bad. They're bigger projects. They're not bad. But as Rob just noted, My greatest concern is that it says the infrastructure will be removed to a depth of 48 inches on agricultural lands. Anything at 48 inches or below will be left in place. I know where they got that technical guidance from. That's from the installation of single lines, a single pipeline going in, a single electrical line going in across the field. And in that case, probably not a big deal. But we're talking about hundreds of solar panels going in on fields across, well, thousands across Jefferson County, but on one particular project, we're talking about hundreds of solar panels that are going to be installed, and anything below 48 inches is going to be left in place.
Affecting the hydrology that you had mentioned. And also.
Well, people will argue, well, below 48 inches, it doesn't matter, but it does, because over time, soil depths change. And it may not be for 100 years, but soil depths do change. You can probably point to rocks in your yard that weren't there when you first started mowing your lawn, and now they've popped up. That's because of soil erosion. And I do not like, and forgive me for getting wound up about this, but the more I looked at it, I was telling my wife this morning, I said, I just can't help but be fired up about this. We're leaving friggin' landfills in our farm fields for future generations. I mean, you think about it, there's going to be a grid work of these electrical lines under our fields that some future generation is going to have to deal with, because the guidance from Ag and Markets and their plans say we'll remove down to 48 inches. Now, that doesn't include the concrete infrastructure. The concrete will change the hydrology eventually when it's left in place, even at 48 inches of depth. But to leave that grid work of electrical lines, and if you think about it, you can imagine what that's going to look like sitting there for some future generation to deal with. To me, it's terrible. It's a terrible thing. So I'll step back and try to count.
They're burying lines then, Jay? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, each solar array.
Below 48 inches they're burying them?
Well, on agricultural land, they have to take them down to, to that.
Bedrock or
48 inches.
48 inches. Bedrock, it's, I think, 42 inches.
Right,
And if there's no bedrock, they have to go to 48.
right.
Really? That deep?
Well, that's because of being able to farm the land.
I'm saying if the solar panels are on there, they're not farming at that point.
I would have to get a clarification on
Then
that.
the decommissioning could be they need to remove everything that's.
The issue is they have the collection lines, and then they got to transmit it to the interconnection, which in some cases is just outside the fence. But if you look at, let's take a Boralex where it might use 25 different parcels, they're going to have all these collection lines getting to their interconnection point. So some of them could be half a mile long from a solar array to the interconnection. Those are the areas that are still going to be farmed. They aren't inside the fenced area that I think Jay is concerned about.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the whole thing, but to me, anything that's left behind that doesn't need to be left behind. I mean, we're allowing companies to put things in the ground, and then to save them money on decommissioning, those are going to be left there for somebody else to deal with eventually.
Just on these two, I found these on the ORES site. One is Boralex, one is Tracy's proposed decommissioning plan, and they're different.
Yeah.
Boralex is going to take everything out of the ground.
No,
They're going to pull the wires out, it said.
not below 48 inches.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tracy, Boralex is going to leave the interconnection there.
Yeah.
It's going to transfer to grid. So if that project goes away, you're still going to have whatever the interconnections are.
Yeah.
Tracy is going to leave only just about everything in the ground as it goes forward.
Yeah.
But those are proposed ones.
Right.
We don't know what the state would finally approve.
So Tracy isn't even conforming with the guideline of 48.
Tracy, I'm trying to find it now. The town of Clayton has a very comprehensive solar law that has a decommissioning requirement. And they're trying to get, one concern that if I was a town officer, I would have is they're putting, all these have projected costs to decommission. So you have the gross cost less recyclable or resale of the materials, and they have to bond for the net. I didn't see anything in these that gives you, just from a year ago to today, the cost of decommission's probably changed dramatically because of inflation. Unless the cost of recyclables, value of recyclables has gone up. Clayton has an escalator in their decommissioning law that requires them to increase their exposure every year as they expect costs to go up. And I think that's what my major concern on these is. I don't know if you need an escalator, but you should have a periodic review of the engineer's estimates to recycle so that irrevocable letter of credit or bond is adequate at the end. Or, if at the end the net is $4 million and your irrevocable letter of credit is only $2 million, you're going to walk from the project.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a problem for the town.
Yeah.
That's one of my major concerns, is making sure that in most of these were like 30 years,
35 years.
30 years out, that the decommissioning irrevocable letter of credit is of adequate value to cover the decommissioning.
Yeah, that's a huge issue with these, that Paul just talked about. The other piece of that is I was talking with Chris Watkins over at the Soil and Water Conservation District about this. There should be a monitoring process after decommissioning for at least 2 years to see if the drainage and the production of that land has been altered. Because you might get done with the project and think you've done a good job, but 2 years from now, a seep, a wet area comes into that field. Now the farm can't farm that field, or it becomes a wetland and they're subject to environmental regulations that they didn't have before because of the project. The other part that I was concerned about, and it's just based on my experience of being on the environmental natural resource side of things in the past, was Ag and Markets calls for an environmental monitor to be put in place by the company. But the company hires the environmental monitor to make sure that the company is abiding by the guidelines and the restrictions of the decommissioning plan. Okay, we're going to hire a fox to guard the hen house. Where, to me, if I were a municipality, I'd be talking to the Soil and Water Conservation District and saying to them, can we put into our decommissioning plans, the company has to hire you to be that neutral monitor between what the company does and what we need to make sure happens. Now, I know some of this is being very picayune, but
Well, it sounds like this might be, sounds the way to address this might be, soil and water, working farming protection board, maybe the local, the planning departments, because they're the ones working with the planning board in general, but because that's going to be at the town level, right? I mean, we're not negotiating.
All the projects we've done, I don't know whether Orleans has done a decommissioning plan. I hope they have. I'm sure the project in Clayton has complied with it, and the smaller projects.
Yeah.
And I think what we're getting to is that, Jay, there needs to be education of hosts or towns and possibly the county on what do you see as needed in a decommissioning plan. So with the towns, like a solar project in Worth, I doubt they have a solar law. I doubt they would So now we're dealing with Rutland, this one. Do they have a decommissioning plan in that one? It's not our business at this time, but I think we should inform them of our concerns of decommissioning plans. On the projects that are going to be deviations, it's educating them, is this an adequate decommissioning plan?
Yeah.
So, but Clayton has a pretty stiff one, and Tracy is trying to get the state to declare that as overly restrictive, their decommissioning bonding issue. So,
And I just hope people will look far enough out, and that will be something I will continue to raise unless I'm told not to.
No, it's worth raising up, but I think it's bringing in ag farm.
Yeah, if you go back to the Duluth discussions over the years, decommissioning was one of the largest issues.
Yeah.
So,
I just, there will probably be a majority of fields that you'll never run into the electric lines that'll be buried down there. But there will be fields where the soil depth changes, or maybe a project comes in that a landowner wants to do, and they're going to be stuck with this mess below ground.
and there was never mastic in PCBs and mastic.
Exactly.
As a quick suggestion, I apologize, I got to step into an IDA meeting in a minute. If Jay's focused on this, and it seems like he's really becoming the authority countywide, decommissioning agreements and bonds are generally going to be struck up in favor of the host towns. So to the extent that individual planning boards or town boards are being stuck with or responsible for oversight of either site plan or special permits, Jay can go out and interface with every one of them, and to the extent that they haven't really identified the agricultural impacts or haven't had an opportunity to absorb them and deploy them in the form of conditions of decommissioning bonds, that's a great role for him to play and arm them with those kind of conditions to add to either special permit or site plan conditions. You guys aren't going to necessarily be the enforcers. You're going to be aware of these things, but the sight, smell, sound, and building conditions are generally governed by towns. And to the extent that you're going to pop up into industrial scale and the state is going to be the police, he can get involved in the community aspects of that and make those detailed suggestions and get them into the record as the state's going to approve those large scale utility arrays.
Yeah, there's another night out there.
That sounds fun.
And just,
Enjoy it.
and one thing, just real quick too.
Jay, he can go out and do a road show in every town.
Yeah.
Thanks, Justin.
But when I was talking to Judy Cherry down in Schuyler County, she was mentioning the subject came up when we were talking, and she's saying, like she was advising the towns too, make sure you have, if they're going to be changing ownership, that you have the LLC on there, because you may have one company, as we talked about, starting the project,
Right.
and then it gets transferred on. Make sure that's bound to the subsequent companies stuck.
Yeah, that's another issue to visit, and it's coming up right now in the game farm project, who is kind of dragging their feet on closing. They're looking at our set of documents and probably scratching their heads, going, "Why didn't I get the free ride in the old set?" Same law firm, incidentally, but we have pretty high bar on what constitutes an assignment. Your former documents, and this isn't a direct criticism, it's not uncommon. The documents that largely govern your existing pipeline of projects say that the project can't be assigned without the IDA's consent, but they shuffle LLC parent ownership 12 different ways that you won't even see. Our set of documents require an approval for assignment for any change in equity above 50% for the life of the project. So they're coming to you. They have to come to you, and if they don't come to you, it's an event of default. Judy had that happen. We literally closed the project in escrow 1 week, and they said, "Oh, we got to wire you the money next week." So I'm like, "Okay, we'll close in escrow, and you guys can fire off the wires next week." We get the wires the following Wednesday. A week later, we find out there's a completely different company involved. So they actually sold it midstream. So what we're trying to do is give IDAs tools to have awareness throughout the life of the project as to who the equity is, who owns it, who's getting your benefit. The continued difficulty with host community agreements and even decommissioning bonds, if there isn't an HCA, is that they set them up to inure to the LLC, but the town generally doesn't have optics on who the heck they're talking to. And we've had instances, even in neighboring counties with you folks, with large wind farms, either the town's trying to build a host community agreement or the IDA's trying to build their pilot, and their mail's getting sent back because they just finding out a year later that it sold once or twice. So it's important to try to have those assignment standards and try to include those not only at the IDA level, but at the town level if you can. But more often than not, those host community agreements and decommissioning bonds are being put on the table by the company, and there may be a town attorney that, you know, he may be a local judge or someone that does a lot of local general practice, but they don't see this stuff come and go, and they won't necessarily drill in onto these concepts.
Great.
You just got yourself another job now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's worth it though.
Hold together, throw in the water, planning out, and then delegate.
Get them charged up.
Yeah, unfortunately, the county didn't give me that authority. Way back. I can pull them together. That's about it.
You delegate like that. You're getting them going and doing it back.
Unfortunately, I think I need to jump and
Okay.
if there's
Thank
any
you,
follow-up
Justin.
questions, let me know. If
All right.
not, I'll get available this
Okay.
afternoon.
All right. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Happy Friday.
So the project we're gonna see in Rutland, Light Star, supposedly it's already just got their permits. It'd be a good thing to do to see how first thing I do is, how'd you handle decommissioning with them and see what they did? You know, because Rutland also has this Borrego project, which probably, if you look at this Light Star, they're clearing land to put that in there. It's all brush, I think, if Google Earth is correct. But that Borrego project is top State Street Hill, all that ag land on top of the hill there, so.
Yeah, and if they were to follow Ag and Markets guidance, they should have already been doing soil sampling to determine depth of soil, the pH, and all of those types of characteristics. Then they'd be stripping the topsoil off, stockpiling that, then doing their earthwork below that in the subsurface. Then they'd be putting that topsoil back on. I doubt that's going to happen because you're talking a lot more cost. And then all of that would happen again when they decommission. And, they'd have the guidance, what was the topsoil depth when we started this project? What do we need to restore the depth of topsoil to when it's finally finished? Not just, we're going to put 4 inches on it.
You want to see something really interesting, you go to the ORES site and you open up, I'm trying to think one of the projects that's well along in there. The number of documents that are kept as confidential will scare you. Everything from environmental documents, wetland documents, decommissioning plans. The general public can't see it unless you're a party to the action. And then to see it, you got to sign an NDA. And it's just amazing. Here they talk about transparency. I don't know what can be confidential other than maybe your calculations on cost. But you can't see some of them. These documents are hidden from public access. In one project, there might have been 20 or 30 different documents. And you know what the big issue with Eagles was on Duluth?
Yeah.
You can't find the Eagles study is, Raptor study, I think they were called.
I think that's state protected though, because we had an issue.
Yeah, sometimes.
We had an
Well,
issue
the
about
issue
that.
is
You cannot talk about it, you can't,
Because the state doesn't want to draw attention to
you
it.
have
Like,
to sign a confidentiality agreement when you're dealing with that, and again, you can't. When it comes to Eagles, you can't talk about anything about them.
But I thought they were removed off the endangered list, which may have removed. them.
Federally they are, but
Yeah.
the state has not.
right, and they might still be
recognized it.
threatened even if they're not endangered.
But there were things in there, if you look through the list of things that they label them as redacted, it was ridiculous. That I can understand, I remember that you can't tell where a nest is, an eagle nest and stuff like that.
Well, even the same thing like when they record some of these studies on rare and endangered, even plant species. A lot of times those are even the state, they're not, because they don't want people to find out where it is and then going to try to pick it and come, or dig it up and get a baby.
They're gonna be doing it with a household marijuana growing.
I don't think that's fair. So, all right.
We're at discussion of utility scale projects.
Yep.
I know, John, you gotta
Yeah,
head out.
they're pretty quick, yeah.
So thought, well, a couple things. I mean, one, I gave you kind of summary of what I've found out so far. There's not a lot of ideas at this point that I'm aware of that are in that far along in negotiating, other than the kind of the two, the one that just closed in Genesee County. Well, they're just about ready to close on it, and then where they're at in Schuyler County. But it seems too, just based on what, Paul's assessment too of the new model for the assessment, the appraisals, that, our 5,500 may be a little bit low. It might be time to think about raising that too, just for the smaller scale projects.
Well, I guess I'm into consistency. We have determined that community solar projects are paying this.
Yeah.
To all of a sudden say, Johnny come lately, we're gonna whack you for some more, is that appropriate or not?
Yeah. Right.
There is the option for local people to save money.
Yep.
But I guess it's up to anyone else.
Yeah.
I'm a guy that I say, we can get up to 100% taxation. I'm cool with anything less than that, but we've done 8. How many have we done? 7 or 8 already at
Almost a dozen.
5,500
I have 15 here.
that we've approved?
Yep.
Well, I'm going by developers. 4 of them were,
Yeah, oh, yeah,
Same.
oh, yeah, well,
But-
yeah.
so to now
Yeah.
change that
Right.
number now, is that
Right.
fair?
Yeah, you're right. No, well, at some point,
Unless we were to start it to, raise it 2% because it's a year later, but to go up
Yeah.
to, till we see the
Right,
numbers, I
true.
think
Yeah.
50% will be higher than what we're getting now.
all right, okay, we'll wait.
But
And that might be the way to do it too. Just escalate our own fee each year, for the starting rate. I don't know.
But that's just my personal
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah,
I think it would be wrong to treat the same, they're gonna have the same economics,
Right.
we said,
Right.
and they probably have a little worse, because I think the credits drop off each year, don't they?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, to your point, Paul, would we be looking at that on a yearly basis and escalating it? Because it would anyway.
But then again, like Paul said, they're decreasing each year. So really each year,
we remember, we
Yeah.
escalated it out and inverted the schedule. I'm thinking if we were to look at this one, okay, costs have gone up,
yeah,
while power prices haven't.
right, yeah.
So if we were to increase it by 2% the starting point and then do the calculation, to me, I can live with that, but to all of a sudden go, okay, you're gonna pay $1,000 more a megawatt because this new formula,
Well,
they're gonna get whacked for
Yeah.
more on
Right.
special districts.
Right, yeah, right.
So, but I guess it's up to the board. That's
Yeah,
just me.
Again, there's probably a big push for these anyway. It's probably a window that this is all gonna happen in the next 5 years. By then, it'll.
I
Yeah,
don't
Well,
know.
I guess let's leave it for now for the community scale. But what do we want? I guess we got.
I don't think we can really have a discussion on community scale until we actually see what's happening elsewhere. And 2, see how the state model's gonna work out.
You mean utility scale? You say
Utility
Yeah,
scale.
okay.
They're called tier 1 in the
Right.
new regulations
Right,
that the
okay.
states put out. But, because, maybe with those, maybe we'll go to an assessment based and an exempt percent
Yeah.
over a lump sum.
Okay. All right.
That might be fair, because if you think about it, if their revenue goes up with a flat rate, they aren't gonna have to pay a bigger share of the tax burden, even though they're making more money. But if their revenue goes down,
Wait, Sorry, say it again.
let's assume power costs go up
Right,
over time. At some point, they're
Right,
gonna
they will,
have to
right.
with all these incentives.
Yeah.
So their revenue stream is gonna change in a tier 1 project,
Right.
but they're gonna have a lump sum payment for that. Whereas if it's assessment based and their revenue goes up, so does their assessment, and so would their pilot.
Yeah.
Conversely, if powers goes down, or there's an extremely bad year, can you expect them to pay a higher value then? Because they're gonna have to do this every year. They're gonna come out with, you're gonna have to recalculate the assessment every year. So, I don't know, that's just one thought. We could go to an assessment based and, but what the argument you're gonna hear is, they're gonna wanna have predictability of what their tax burden is.
Mhm.
Of course, I'd like that myself. Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
But.
So do we hold off on utility scale discussions till we see where things land?
If Justin's right, I thought it was gonna require by the end of October to have them the final model. But if we're in November, is it gonna hurt us to? wait
No,
till
and we're
November?
not gonna see anything coming to us, on the utility scale for any kind of application before that.
Well, I was worried we were until I heard that it's not our inducement that triggers the prevailing wage rate.